Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Grant Cameron, and I have a special guest that I have an assistant. Nicole Sackage is joining me from Illinois. And Nicole and it was actually Nicole's idea to come up with a panel for triangle witnesses. So this upcoming Saturday and Sunday, we have two large panels of people with triangle stories from around the world. And we had a couple of stories that were sort of too big to actually give them the proper time on a panel where they would only get a couple of minutes. And the guest that's joining us this morning for a full broadcast is my friend, Dr. Lynne Kitei from Arizona. So good morning, Lynne.
Good morning to everyone. Yes, this
Yeah.
is exciting. I'm so glad and that I get a chance to really share some of the important data from what's become the most witnessed,
Yeah.
most documented, most important mass anomalous aerial sightings in modern history, if not all of history. And coming to this, not only as a medical doctor, but as a key witness to this incredible story, actually, which we're going to share today, how it unfolded. But coming as a scientist and trying to be as meticulous as I could with the data, coming as a physician, to let people know that they're not alone, that even though most anomalies can be explained, only a small percentage cannot. Just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. And people need to know out there when they have an anomalous experience, it's real to them, even though it might be explainable. And to share it is cathartic, it's healing. So, certainly, as a physician, as an experiencer, up close and personal. 2 years before the mass sighting, 2 months before the mass sighting, during the mass sighting, and subsequently, I certainly know what it feels like to have a paranormal, out of this world experience. And I happen to be the only person who has captured 35 millimeter photographs of what is now called the Phoenix lights, which is miraculous. I've had them analyzed and authenticated by military and university optical experts throughout the last 25 years. And they are true unknowns. They cannot be explained or denied. And certainly as an educator for over 40 years, on the reality of vital health issues. I work with NBC and USA Cable and have a company out there, health education learning programs. When this fell in my lap 2 years before the mass sighting, without any interest or knowledge in this topic at all, but capturing photographs up close and personal and having an experience that was just totally incredible. And then 2 years later, capturing the same phenomena, same mile wide phenomena head on, turning into a V shape, confirmed the next morning by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport as true unknowns. And we'll get into that conversation, as well as during the mass sighting, I captured the signature video, the signature footage of that night, the only footage that has been authenticated as a true unknown, confirmed again the next morning by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport as over a mile wide, with these lights that seemed to be attached to something that turned against the wind. There is so much information and misinformation and disinformation out there that after thousands of people saw what I had been seeing on March 13th, 1997 for 2 years, I actually pushed my entire medical career, accomplished medical career aside, to try to find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed, which I have yet to find. But what I ended up with 7 years later was a 750-page journal of such incredibly credible data that ultimately, as a scientist, as a physician, as an experiencer, and as an educator, I couldn't just stick it in a drawer, and finally came forward in 2004 to set the record straight and to share the data. The data speaks for itself. Let people decide for themselves.
Beautiful. Now we're gonna
Is that a good 5 minutes
yes,
sort of?
beautiful, beautiful.
I'm sorry, I kind of,
We're going to go to the. I'm getting a feedback here.
is the sound okay?
Am I coming across okay?
Yes. Both of
Okay.
you are.
Oh, okay. I've got
Okay.
a feedback here. You mentioned your involvement. Before we go to the slides, we're going to do your slides. I got a question for you. In terms of coming forward, what was that like for you being sort of a doctor and your husband? How did you break this that, okay, I'm going forward with this?
After much soul searching, 7 years after the mass sighting, I stayed anonymous, totally anonymous. Only a handful of people and scientists and professors at university that I was consulting on my 35 millimeter photographic evidence, trying to find a logical explanation, and no one could give one. And realizing that after pushing my accomplished medical career aside and finding so much credible data that confirmed not only the vast history of these phenomena for centuries since human documentation began. But as the story unfolded, it was so fascinating, so interesting that ultimately, with the data that I had on 35 millimeter and video that could not be explained or denied, I just couldn't stick it in a drawer. As an educator for over 40 years on the reality of vital health issues, I felt it was imperative to share the reality of this vital issue.
Beautiful. Okay, let's go to the slides here. And um,
Is that okay? Is that coming through okay, Nicole?
Yeah,
Because I
it
sound
is.
very froggy, but it is what it is. I guess. Okay.
okay, so
No,
can
see
you see
now
my
that,
screen?
oh my goodness, that's all over the place. I wanted to tell the story as it unfolded. That's why I gave it to you in the email the way I did, because I wanted to start 2 years before the mass sighting. And
Okay,
then,
we've got that, but we've got just the opening slides. Can you see the slides?
yes, the
Okay,
book.
yeah, the book. So just this is the book cover, right? So you did a
Nobody's hearing us right now. We're discussing ourselves, right?
no. This is going to be this is going to be on the main presentation.
No,
So
no,
I'm
no. I
gonna
mean, right now, we're not being recorded.
yeah
Yeah.
We are.
yeah.
Oh,
The
geez.
first 5 minutes I'm going to take out, and then this is the part that we're going to go live
Well,
with here.
can we start like now?
Okay.
Is that
Yeah,
okay? I mean, I don't want,
I'll cut out the part that where we're not making sense here.
oh,
I'll
okay, thank you.
one. Okay, so this is the cover of your book, correct?
Oh, yeah. This actually is a fourth edition of the book, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. It took me 7 years to really compile the 750-page journal every single day. I pushed my whole medical career aside and every day kept notes of not only the history, which I had no idea about until I found out a week after the mass sighting that this was happening worldwide, and other countries are much more open to these phenomena as being otherworldly, as our own governor ultimately would disclose. But when I first came out with the book in 2004, I squeezed the best of what I had found over 7 years into 230 pages. And as the story unfolded, and it's fascinating in and of itself how the story has unfolded and evolved, I actually added chapters. The first book is so important. Every word is there. I squeezed the best of 750 pages to really relay how important everything is that I put in there: media reports, conversations I had with military, as well as the history and the Native American connection. We'll get into that, as well as the connection between all unexplained phenomena. That in itself took me on a new road, because a number of witnesses had had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. And that blew me away, because I did too. And if we have time, I'll get into that. But ultimately, I have added chapters in the book, as well as a documentary. This is the cover to the latest edition of the Phoenix Lights documentary, which is one of over a dozen international film festival awards. We're so excited and thrilled and honored that this has been really accepted not only by the UFO community, but also the mass media community. And that we keep evolving that as well and adding to the bonus features. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell is in it, as well as a 911 police operator who was on that night and got hundreds of calls, even though the media and government denied that for a while. And you can see from listening to the stories of the witnesses themselves, descriptions are so detailed and so heartfelt. I thought it was important to have a visual, a gentle overview. The book gets into much more detail, but the documentary itself is not only for ufologists and for people into the topic, but also for people who aren't. Everybody comes from a different background, from a different upbringing, from a different belief system. Some people can't deal with this topic. Some people don't want to, and that's okay. Everyone in their own time. But now there's the book, the documentary, and recently, coming from my educational background on vital health issues, I wanted to get something into the classroom. And we're still working on the curriculum. But in the meantime, I wanted to get something out there that could be used not only by children, but adults as well. Teachers who are using it in the classroom as we speak, as well as parents and grandparents, to learn and to grow and to really know the not only the story of the Phoenix Lights. This is called the Phoenix Lights, UFOs, and Crop Circles coloring book, The Adventures of Sue FO, Field Observer, and Hugh FO. And he's a little alien. And I worked with a Disney illustrator, fabulous teachers. We had pilot programs in the classroom. I got feedback from the kids as well as experts in the field, a map maker who actually came to Phoenix. We're going to get into the fact that there may have been 10 different craft that people saw after a 12-year study. That was what was concluded because they were so different. But we'll get into that. But he actually came to Phoenix. David came to Phoenix and to scale. From the descriptions and from the data that was collected, we have the 10 different craft to color, as well as iconic pictures. I wanted to share with anyone out there who was interested that there is a vast history of these phenomena, as well as 80 crop circles to color. And I tried to also pick the ones that were the most complicated, that really couldn't have been man-made, as well as a whole activity section that has word finders and crossword puzzles and sacred geometry. I mean, we really go from childhood to adulthood and try to put everything in there in 160 pages in the color copy and 150 pages in the black and white copy so that people can enjoy it. It's a wonderful gift for the holidays, I have to tell you. When I go to conferences, I can't keep them in my hand. As soon as people see them and the content inside, and that's sold by Amazon. They're all sold on Amazon. We're going to get into the GAP geospatial animation project, which was a 12-year study. But I wanted to first show the topography, so the people that are seeing the pictures subsequently will see that if you look on the bottom left, you can see that there's a car on the road.
Okay.
The lights reflect onto the road. Very different from the true unknowns. Again, there's so much mis and disinformation out there. It was really imperative that I share this data too, so that you can see the reality of what these objects are and then decide for yourself. On the right of that car is actually skylights. If you can see the line of lights on top of that home, which is significant because, and I don't know if I can use can you see this? Can you see my
No,
arrow?
no,
Okay.
it's my screen.
Thank you for showing that. And if you go straight up, you're going to see, no, if you go straight up on that picture,
Yeah.
you can see South Mountain on the left,
Yeah.
and the Estrella Mountains on the right.
Right.
Where they intersect. And you're going to see subsequently the pictures that I have seem to show that these phenomena keep popping up in that area. Now, there's a little aside that I want to share since we're looking at this picture, which I think your audience will appreciate, because this is part of the whole Phoenix Lights picture. South Mountain is on the left. A few miles back is the Estrella Mountain Range. In between those mountain ranges is the Gila Bend, G-I-L-A, Gila Bend Indian Reservation. And they only have one school and invited me to present my substance abuse prevention education program 6 months before the mass sighting. Serendipitously, there's many coincidences that I do not no longer believe in coincidence, but this was one of them, where they invited me to help them out. And 6 months later, we had the mass sighting, and I started to notice which your audience will notice soon, that these phenomena keep popping up right where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect, very much where their sacred ground is. And I called the principal up and I said, did anybody happen to see strange lights on March 13th? And he started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? He said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky beings, light beings, sky people. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first I had heard of it. And on further inquiry, I not only found out, and he shared with me, that that's how the Estrellas got its name. It means star in Spanish, gateway to the stars. And they also believe in that area that the area is a gateway or portal to these other intelligences, which then I found out many indigenous cultures worldwide welcome these other intelligences. In fact, the Hopi Indian reservation here has protocols to invite these intelligences in. Some believe that these orbs, particularly that thousands saw on March 13th, 1997, and I saw up close and personal 2 years before, are actually spirit world or intelligences, ancestors coming to give them guidance and comfort and knowledge and inspiration. And I have to admit, Grant, I have been inspired to do this. I would have never, ever chosen this topic, but for some reason, as you can tell, I'm a
Yeah.
little passionate about it. So I wanted to share that aspect, because that's a very important aspect in all of these, because the native cultures have believed not only that there's other intelligences out there visiting us and welcome them, but it's a very benevolent situation. And they also believe in the connection between all things. We can get into that if we have time, which is very poignant and something that the Phoenix Lights actually relayed to people during the mass sighting.
Beautiful.
Okay. If we can go back to the first picture, and then I'm going to share with you the first sighting that I had, because again, with no interest or knowledge in this topic at all, the night before my birthday eve, February 6th, my birthday is February 7th. My husband was standing at one wall of our bedroom is a window, and we're pretty high on the mountain. This is our view from our mountainside home, which we get to see planes coming in and out of Sky Harbor. We know what helicopters, streetlights, car lights look like. And I happen to be in the other room in the bath. And again, we're nestled in the mountains and we're a gated community. So there is no way, and I underline that this was military. It's a no-fly zone. And here I am relaxing, and my husband is standing at the window, that anything that pops up out there, pretty much we can see if we're in the bedroom. And he was on several medical and hospital boards at the time, one that doesn't get ruffled at all. And he was speaking to my mother-in-law back east, calling to wish me a happy birthday. And suddenly he yells out, "Lynn, get over here quick. Get over, what the hell is that?" And he never sounded excited like that. So I grab my tail, I run to the window, dripping wet. And a little below us were three amber orbs over very treacherous, again, gated community, very treacherous desert landscape. And it was like, it was so close. It was about 100 yards away, if not closer. And it was something that just stops you, and you're in awe, because it's something you've never seen before. And coming from a video workbook background, I wanted to grab my video camera, but as many people out there, I'm sure, that have had experiences like this will say, you don't want to move. You don't know how long it's going to last. So I tried to take everything in mentally: the size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each. They were oval shaped, like an egg on its side. And I've described that since it happened, actually, to very few people at the time. But what's really ironic and amazing is when the Nimitz Air Force came forward, the Nimitz pilots, to say that what they have seen were oval shape. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happened is similar to what they said. I mean, the color within each orb was an amber color throughout, didn't glare. at all. Every other light glare out there. These were very soothing, very mesmerizing. And I'm thinking to myself, if I don't get a picture of this, and I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge, it was self-contained. And I thought, if I don't get a picture, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 millimeter. My husband calls me back. He says, get over here quick. One of them is disappearing. And we both stood there in wonder. I mean, just it was just awesome to see the top orb, and it's very hard to describe. When the Nimitz Air Force described these as a lozenge shape, which they were, actually cloaking. They were like mechanically, as if there was an intelligence behind them, started to shrink very, very slowly, like a dimmer switch. Again, it's difficult to describe in logical terms, but to a pea size, again, mechanically, as if there's an intelligence behind it. And when it disappeared, it still felt like it was there. Where did it go? To another dimension, perhaps?
Yeah.
I stepped out on the balcony. Now we can go to that next picture. Shot a picture of the two lower orbs, and you can see them on the lower left-hand side, and immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was just bizarre. And as I stood there staring at these two lower orbs, it felt like something was watching me. I have to admit that, and I did not admit it to us all till after the mass sighting 2 years later. But going through my mind at that exact moment, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. The next thing I remember, the left bottom orb, and that's the next picture, started to shrink, just like the top one did. And I quickly caught a picture of that. Now, number one, that was the only picture that turned out at the time, but it's miraculous. You have your little arrow on there that I caught. One half disappeared and one's still there. I mean, that's amazing on a cheap Canon Instamatic camera, but nonetheless, that's what I captured. And what's amazing in and of itself is that if you go back to the first picture that I took, which I found out I had later on when I went through the strips that I was told didn't have anything on them, but actually they did. And they were analyzed 3 years after this sighting in 1998 by Navy optophysicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee, very well respected in the field. And after I had sent him the first and the last picture, he came back to me and he said, you told me that sighting up close was only a couple minutes long. I said, right. He said, are you sure? I said, that's what I remember. He said, ask your husband. Interestingly, as I mentioned, everybody reacts differently. My husband was inside, I was outside. He did not want to talk about the close sighting at all. In fact, he just got a little agitated and I didn't talk about it. And I told him this, and he said, well, you have to confirm that it was that time. And I just sat him down. I said, look, we don't have to talk about the sighting, the close sighting, but what do you remember it lasting? He says, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes long. I go back to Dr. Maccabee. And this is another little aside, but I thought your viewers would be interested in this because I really haven't gotten this out there big time, and I haven't shared it that much as well. It took me over a dozen years to share it in the second edition of the book. But he said to me, first of all, the same exact phenomena, as you will see in a little bit, that I caught head on turning into a V, and also video that the night of the mass sighting, but caught the same thing 2 months before the mass sighting, is in the same location, disappearing where that big arrow is, as I'm capturing the close objects. The close objects, I was so concentrated on, I didn't even notice those, but he did. He noticed not only that they were in the same location, again, you can see the skylights on the bottom. It's the same location where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. Go to the next picture, and you can see that the same phenomena, now there are two of them, okay?
Yeah.
So then he says to me, look at the skyline. He says, it's very interesting that the same phenomena was there in 95 that you also captured in 97, but go back to the first picture. And he says to me, look at the skyline. I said, okay. He said, and I would have never, ever noticed this data. He says there are many groups of lights on in the first picture, groups of lights, not just individual lights, that are off. And if you go to the second picture, that are off in the second picture.
Yeah.
And he says, that doesn't happen in a couple of minutes. He said, I'd like you to do an experiment for me. He was very meticulous in his investigation. He said, go out onto the balcony, try to stand where you were standing in 95 and take a picture of the skyline one night every hour, the next night every half hour. And I actually did it another night every 15 minutes to find out when these groups of lights start going out. And I did. And he said to me, can I present this case in the upcoming 1999 MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, which I had never heard of before, International Symposium in Washington, D.C. This is 1999. I said, hey, I said, Dr. McAbee, this is your baby. I would have never realized this data. I wouldn't even have realized that the same phenomena were in the background, in the distance, as I would capture in 97. Just please leave my name out of it. I really do want to stay anonymous. And he was so kind to do so, as were a handful of other people. And he presented the case in 1999, and his full report is on the Phoenix Lights Network website, thephoenixlights.net, if anybody wants to look at his 21-page report. And it's also a snippet of it is in my book now in the 4th edition, but he presented it in 1999 at the MUFON International Symposium in Washington, D.C. as the first, and as far as we know, the only authenticated photographic evidence of missing time.
Wow. Beautiful.
So I share that with you. Now, wait a minute, don't go on. Don't be a spoiler. Okay, for 2 years, did not see anything remotely like these lights, close or far. And, you know, like I said, being in our bedroom, one of our walls is a giant window. So whatever pops up out there, whether it's a smoke from a fire or planes coming in and out of Sky Harbor or a haboob, a dust storm, we get to see, didn't see anything, even close to these lights, close or far, until 2 months before the mass sighting, January 22nd, 1997, I'm lying in bed and I see 3 amber orbs, giant balls of light in an equidistant line formation. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're in a line formation now, equidistant from each other. They're amber, they're huge balls of light. And as I watched, each one shrunk from right to left. And I actually mentioned to my husband, and he joked about it. Do I still have to go to work tomorrow? He just didn't want anything to do with these phenomena. But the next night, he was at a medical board meeting. And I noticed the same 3 lights in a row are now in front of South Mountain, which is directly behind the airport. And I knew they were in front of South Mountain because there's red blinking lights on the top of the mountain to alert aircraft coming into the airport. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm getting video of this. And I run outside. I got about 18 seconds worth. The battery goes dead and it was charged. I run in, I plug it in, I go out, they're gone. This is about 8 o'clock. Now, this is 2 months before the mass sighting, January 23rd. My husband comes up the drive about 8:30. I go outside. I said, honey, remember I told you about the 3 giant orbs in a line formation, equidistant from each other last night? Well, about a half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. As I'm pointing like this, they reappear in the same spot. And it was like, whoa, I gotta get a picture of this. And that again is another coincidence, because on video, it doesn't do the lights justice. They're much smaller, they're white, they flicker, but in 35 millimeter, they're in the negative. Again, they cannot be denied. So I run outside with my 35 millimeter. As I'm ready to shoot the 3, suddenly 6 pop on, massive span over the 3. Now you can show the next picture if you would. And you can see that it's wavy because I was shaking. I have to tell you, not having an explanation for the close sighting in 95, I was thinking it was so massive that it just popping into my head, oh my goodness, this is a mothership or a fleet. I mean, it was unnerving, but I kept clicking away. The second picture is really important. If we can do that, yes, thank you. Because this one, again, 2 months before the mass sighting, shows unequivocally the top formation is like a V, okay? And it looks like there's two underneath. 2 months later, thousands of people that saw these phenomena right above their heads would describe the anomalies as mile wide and larger, which we'll get into, 5 lights in a V formation with two trailing. Now, this is 2 months before the mass sighting. And I continued taking pictures. Next one, then you can see that there's one orb on the bottom now. As the three orbs were disappearing on the bottom, the top formation was turning. Okay, and you can see that it was turning so that the biggest ball in the middle there is now on the right. It's the second one, exactly. Now, the next picture is very poignant because this picture has been analyzed, and what was speculated was that we're seeing these orbs, and these were described by people. Some people described actual craft, which we'll get to, but other people described, including Sky Harbor International Airport controllers, as these lights seemed to be attached to something or had a force field in between. And if you look at the bigger lights, we're postulating that that was the closer arm, and the two lights in between is a further away arm. If you can see that there, exactly, that's the biggest, bigger, closer arm. And then the two lights in between are a further away arm. Was there a force field holding them in rock solid formation? That's only a speculation, but I put that out there. Well, we can leave this picture for now because what happened the next morning, I did not sleep well that night. And I woke up thinking, come on, there's got to be a logical explanation for this. And the night before, no, please don't. Just keep on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because that's a whole nother story. Anyway, the next morning, because the night before, I have to share that as the three were disappearing underneath, I ran in and called the Arizona Republic Air newspaper and said, you got to get somebody out there quick. There's strange lights in front of South Mountain. Get somebody to take a picture and tell me what it is. By the time I finished my sentence, they were gone. The first thing I did the next morning was call the Arizona Republic. And I asked if anybody called to report strange lights in front of South Mountain. The operator got off, she got right back on. She said, nope, nobody called. Well, I know I called. So I said, look, I said, we did see something strange. I even got it on film. I don't know who to call. What do you suggest? She says, well, sometimes they do experimental maneuvers from Luke Air Force Base. Why don't you give them a call? Which I did. And I tried to be very professional. My husband and I are both physicians. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley, and we saw some strange lights at a distance near the airport. Do you know what they might have been? From the get-go, she had an attitude. And she said, well, they didn't come in to Luke Air Force and they didn't come out from here, so we had nothing to do with them. I said, be that as it may, we did see something really strange and it was huge. And I did get pictures of it. She said, well, you said it was near the airport. Maybe they saw something there. Now it was a mission. So I called the FAA. And I tried to be professional again, and the operator was really kind. And she said, let me see if there were any air traffic controllers who saw something last night. She kept me hanging forever. She got back on. She said, well, actually, there was a group of air traffic controllers here last night, and a couple of them are here this morning, that did see strange lights appear right over Class B restricted airspace. And it was like, whoa. I said, can I speak to one of them? And it took forever to get him on the phone. He was a really low-key guy. I met him subsequently, and he gets on the phone. He was more excited than me, if you can believe that. Did you see the 6 light where he put this in from each other hovering in formation last night at 8:30? I said, yes. And he said, I can't believe you called because we saw 3 at 8 o'clock. And then at 8:30, 6 popped up. And he said it was very concerning because, and he was very forthcoming initially, these phenomena popped up over Class B restricted airspace. Now, there's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport. Anyone that comes into that airspace, particularly 1,000 feet altitude that these were, must call into the tower, and no one did. So they immediately looked on radar. It did not show up on radar, both the 8 o'clock and the 8:30. They took up their high-powered binoculars to look. And in their own words, they described 6 points of light, totally equidistant from each other, massive span over a mile wide, that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what these lights were attached to. And one of them was a meteorologist and said the entire thing turned as a unit against the wind. That's very poignant and important data as well. Then elevated slowly as a unit and then moved in synchrony behind South Mountain. So I said, so what was it? And then there was silence. And then one of them says, beats me. I said, you're air traffic control. You're supposed to know what's in our airspace. They ruled out every conventional aircraft, balloons, Chinese lanterns, flares, as well as skydivers with lights, every conventional possibility they ruled out. To them, they were true unknowns. And we kept in contact, continued photographing these phenomena up into including March 13th, 1997, when thousands of people were outside looking up at the sky purposely for a view of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very visible in the northwest sky that night, when they also caught a glimpse of these Mile and Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, a couple years ago, after analyzing hundreds, if not thousands, of drawings and so forth from people that had contacted him about the mass sighting night, divulged that one of the objects, and we have to say there were orb formations of just these lights, and there were actual craft, which I will get to, but one of them was actually 8 miles wide. So we're talking about massive, massive anomalous aerial phenomena that were going at rooftop levels, gliding right over people's heads. People said about 30 miles an hour, totally silent. Some people looked up in these wells. We have a pilot, a Vietnam and commercial airline pilot, who was actually right underneath one of these, what he called a canister in the documentary, and he describes inside the spinning energy. Some people saw these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it later. Is that what happened in '95? I leave that to the viewer to decide. But nonetheless, people did see this and report it. Other people, and we're talking so silent, not a pin drop, took off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. If you go on the Geospatial Animation Project, GAP page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, and now we can get to the different craft. It was a 12-year study of thousands of reports from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, as well as Village Labs, which was a clearinghouse. It was a computer lab, huge computer lab in Tempe that also analyzed not only my pictures, but reports as well. And Councilwoman Vice Mayor of Phoenix, Frances Emma Barwood, who was the only elected official who actually asked innocently, she didn't see it, but over 1,000 people had contacted her to say, why isn't there investigation, which we'll get to. And she had reports as well in this study, and 2 or more people had to see the same exact craft to be in the study. And if we can show some of these craft, they're amazing. Do you have anything to show, Grant?
I have just the photos as you put
Well,
them
this
through.
is this actually is a picture that was taken a year after the mass sighting. We can talk about that. I'm not sure what you have next. No, we don't want to go any further. No. Go back.
Okay.
But at any rate, on March 13th, just so we can finish this up, because there is so much mis and disinformation out there, it just seemed imperative that I come forward to set the record straight. And here is some of it. Not only were there multiple craft, and the study showed 10 different craft. One of the craft actually split in 2 and shot straight up. And if you look in the GAP page, you'll see that they look very different. Some of them are very different, even where pilots saw a disc-shaped craft. But going back to this, it might have been one craft that could morph, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade. And that ultimately was what the investigators decided, because not only was there different objects happening at different times in different areas, and we're talking not only Arizona, we're talking New Mexico, where the sightings began, by the way, at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, daylight sightings in Arizona. 5 o'clock hour, New Mexican Native Americans reported they were seeing the same phenomena. 7 o'clock hour and through 11 o'clock hour in California, and also over Nevada. And because let me tell you, this story is really amazing, and I share it. It took the pilot years to confide in me, and ultimately she said she hasn't come forward, but she said I could share it in the book. About 10 o'clock, she left Phoenix with a whole crew and 140 passengers on her way to California. As they approached Las Vegas, they see this incredibly massive craft cover Las Vegas. And she called the radar tower and asked if they were pinging anything. Almost simultaneously, another commercial pilot called in and says, "What the hell is this in front of me?" And not only that, but a voice came on, a very authoritative voice came on the speaker, and kind of freaked her out and wanted, everything in detail. And she said, "Wait, whoa, I think we must have been mistaken. We're not sure what it was, and we're on our way to California." As they get close to California, about a half hour later, they're at 30,000 feet. Suddenly, they see a giant flare less than a half a mile away on one side of the aircraft. Moments later, on the opposite side, whizzing by them even closer, she said she jumped out of her seat, was a military plane. So you have to wonder what kind of message that was. The sightings continue. Now, of course, between 8 and 10, and that's where the media picked up and said that the sighting was only a couple hours, that it was 2 events. We'll get to that in a minute. But actually, in reality, the sightings, the 8 to 10 period, that's when the multitude of people were outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet, and also caught a glimpse of these mile to 8 mile wide aerial phenomena, and called the police station and Luke Air Force Base, which they denied, by the way, but people got the number for the National UFO Reporting Center from Luke Air Force Base, et cetera. And so that's when the bulk of people called in. But the sightings continued. In fact, it continued all the way to the next morning, until 5:30 the next morning. The last report I got personally from a Boeing crewman, who said his whole crew was coming into Sky Harbor, and right over their tarmac at 5:30 a.m. was this massive craft. So we're talking about multitude of activities, which the investigators ultimately decided this was a parade. This was a parade of multiple anomalies, which people don't know about. They think it was only one craft that came through Arizona. That is not the case. Yes, one craft did come through the most populated corridor of Arizona, but there was much more going on for over a dozen hours, a parade of multiple orb formations and craft formations in 4 different states, in Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Nevada. And a very other interesting aside, people say, well, why didn't the military do something? They were quite aware of what was going on. In fact, an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base, and we have a snippet of the recording that he made to Peter Davenport that evening at 3 a.m., very detailed, very professional. At 3 a.m., called in to say that there were craft from Luke Air Force Base sent to intercept and get gun camera film of one of these mile-wide craft that was hovering over central Phoenix at actually 7th Avenue and Indian School. And as they got close, the lights started to dim, and then the craft totally disappeared, freaking out one of the pilots that he said himself, he helped one of the pilots out of his craft. And then Luke was on lockdown after that. So they were very much aware early that evening that there was something extraordinary happening throughout the state of Arizona. And that pretty much. Do you have any questions about the mass sighting?
No, I mean you're spelling out a lot of new material.
Okay, well, because there's more. Not only, and this is really important to state, Grant, there is not one credible report to this day, 25 years later, of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. Can't speak for other things, but I can for the Phoenix Lights phenomena. If anything, it was just the opposite. People were in awe and in wonder, curious what this was. In fact, we have people today still tell me that they feel blessed to have seen what they saw. And that we have people afterwards. I mean, the transformation, we can talk about that when we get into how it affected people so profoundly, that we have people today that changed their eating habits and went into the peace movement, went into the environmental movement, that changed their lives forever. So whoever did this, and I always say, I don't know what they were, but I know that they were. And it's time we get this topic out in the open, address it, accept it, and study it so we can find out not only who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. So the data is out there if people care to look at it. And there's much more to the story, because as the story unfolded, miraculously, there was no investigation. There was no investigation or explanation for months. People would go to the governor and to the mayor, and they would say, what, something happened on March 13th? And as I mentioned earlier, Councilwoman Vice Mayor of Phoenix, Frances Barwood, happened to mention it in a meeting, in a council meeting in May. And she was plastered by the media. I have to tell you, the ridicule and the snickering and the discrediting that was going on in those days in 97 was just scary. It was really scary to come forward. I was so glad that I had stayed anonymous. Another question that people ask is, why weren't there more pictures taken? Well, if you remember, in 97, we had those clunky cameras, clunky phones, cell phones, without cameras. So, some people happened to be outside trying to capture pictures of the Hale-Bopp comet, but these things were so blocked out the stars. Some people said they could see the stars through them, but most said it blocked out the stars. Saw gunmetal on the bottom. Some people even saw windows, but when they tried to take pictures of it, they turned out black. So that's why there's only a handful of video that night, including my own. Now, this is important data too. Myself and Steve Blonder with a group of MUFON, because it's amazing that people would say that there wasn't any data. There is so much data to really look at and digest and consider. And consider this, before 10 o'clock, now Steve Blonder was seeing these things like myself for days before, and he called MUFON up to his balcony. And while they were up there on March 13th during the mass sighting, they actually captured 5 lights like an arrowhead. And that was before 10 o'clock. My video was just 3 endpoints of a giant V or triangle over the city, which also actually is the only one that's been authenticated as a true unknown, because the air traffic controller saw it at the same time as I was shooting it. But they too, those two were before 10 o'clock. After 10 o'clock, there were 2 boomerang videos. Now, one is a little haphazard. I've never used that. But the other, the Kristen video, is rock solid. I mean, these things, these lights just seem to be attached to something. And that's the one that's been under fire for being flares. We will get to that. As the story unfolded, and again, there was no investigation, no explanation. June 18th, 1997, for whatever reason, suddenly there was a front page USA Today article that divulged our sighting for the first time. Our mass sighting was acknowledged outside of Arizona. And actually, we didn't have social media at the time, but it went viral overnight. The next morning, we were deluged by media from all over the world. And they too, once they started interviewing the witnesses, their descriptions were so detailed and so heartfelt They kept asking, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? Suddenly, the next morning, late morning, we get a public announcement that then Governor Fife Symington was holding a press conference that afternoon, an unscheduled press conference, to divulge the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. And everybody took it seriously. And he comes marching out, one of his aides, with a giant alien head costume and made a mockery of the mass sighting, which was really disconcerting, especially for parents who were with children that saw these massive craft or whatever that were 2 and 3 miles wide, and he's making a joke out of it. That kind of put a lid on things, but not for me. I started calling every military base, and I have some of their comical conversations in the book. They were more interested, and I never gave them details, in what I had photographed than giving an explanation for it. They were just as curious. A month later, July 24th, I get a call from one of the heads of the Air National Guard. And she says, "Oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March." And I was thrilled. I was looking for any logical explanation. She says, "Do you believe that in all these months, no one ever looked at the log for missing Air National Guard? And the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off military illumination flares in Operation Snowbird, which I later found out meant military diversionary tactics, which they may have sent out flares, but I have to tell you, we don't have one witness to the true unknowns that describes what flares do." In the meantime, I said to her, "Well, wait a minute. When was the Maryland Air National Guard in town?" She says, "March 1st to the 15th. I said, "Were they in town in January?" She says, "Oh, no." I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Well, I have photographs of the same exact phenomena in the same exact location, confirmed the next morning by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport, both times in January in the morning after the mass sighting, as appearing over Class B restricted airspace at 1,000 feet altitude." And she says, "You never told me that." And then I said to her, "Well, wait a minute. And you're trying to tell me that flares," and I had educated myself to anything logical, including military illumination flares, that drift and drop on parachutes haphazardly with the wind, have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself. In fact, that's why they're used, to illuminate the area around it. Not one person described that. And I said to her, "And you're trying to tell me that flares that cannot keep a formation traverse the entire state of Arizona for hours in a rock solid, equidistantly spaced, mile wide V formation?" And she says, "I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you." Well, I'm still waiting, Cameron, for that call. In the meantime, 3 years later, it's so intriguing how this story unfolds, because 3 years later, Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood was then running for Secretary of State on a platform to get answers for the lights over Phoenix. And she was asking for a reenactment, which was amazing because, again, I'm a healthy skeptic. Okay, one must be when you're a physician for anything walking through the door. But I'm a show me person. I've seen it up close and personal. Show it to me again. If the military did it, well, shame on them for denying it and putting it right over people's heads. But hey, go for it. Right before the 3rd anniversary, again, we get a public announcement on TV, on the news, on the radio, that 3 Air National Guards, and believe it was New York, Michigan, and California, were coming into town to show everyone the Phoenix lights. Well, we were ready for them, and it was a dire failure for them. If you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website, thephoenixlights.net, go to the news page. And again, it's packed with information, but if you scroll down to the Arizona Family Square there, you will see exactly what they did. They tried to make a triangle. It was upside down. It fell apart immediately. It had huge smoke trails, just what flares do. To this date, the Phoenix lights have never been recreated or explained. And by the way, the flare theory was the only thing that ever was forthcoming from the military or government, and never proven, by the way. But They never addressed the craft that thousands of people saw. And again, it wasn't anything that you can just see through, although some people did see stars through the massive formation. But people actually saw gunmetal on the bottom. People saw these canisters of light. And again, some came off the main object and went back on it. Other people saw these things split in two. I mean, we're talking about phenomena, technology that was so advanced. Have we seen anything? And you should know, Grant, I mean, you're really into this, that comes close to these anomalous phenomena, technology in 25 years? Okay. Well, let's fast forward now to 10 years after the mass sighting. It gets even more interesting because the former governor, Fife Symington, for whatever reason, right after the 10th anniversary, divulged that what he had seen during the mass sighting, he divulged that he actually saw one of the craft, and that not only was it not flares as a military and awarded military pilot, what he saw was otherworldly, which you would also hear other countries say ad infinitum as I did my research, that these phenomena were otherworldly. And that was a big step forward, I have to say, for an elected official to be brave enough to come forward and actually divulge that he actually saw the Phoenix Lights, even though he mocked it in 97. He was saying at the time that people were panicking. No, people weren't panicking. Quite the contrary. I'm sure it was the military and government that were panicking, because after the USA Today article came out the next morning, being deluged by media from all over the world, they had to come up with something. And as I mentioned earlier in video, the lights are much smaller, they're white, they flicker. Nonetheless, the formations are very compelling for someone that studies them. But when you just look at them straight out, you might get confused with flares. So whoever came up with that explanation was brilliant, I have to say. Now fast forward again to 2017, when we have the Pentagon. Well, we can do you want to talk about the pictures, or do you want to talk?
Yeah, let's finish the pictures first.
Okay. Yeah, you can go back to the one before. Thank you. The triangle.
Is that the one?
Yes. This is pretty interesting too, because a year after the mass sighting, without seeing any of anything that was similar to the orbs that we saw on March 13th, 1997. And again, if people go to the photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, they can see the plethora, the unique collection I have of these Phoenix Lights phenomena. And this happened a year after the mass sighting. We had such a fog, and fog is very rare in Phoenix because our humidity is usually 10. But we had this fog that we couldn't even see past our street. And again, my husband would joke, they are watching us. But that weekend, it was really like a wall of fog. And by Monday night, it was clearing up a little bit. And my husband and I went out on the balcony. And subsequently, I had met with the University of Arizona Optical Science Department. I really tried to do my homework as a scientist, and met with the Brooks Institute of Photography and other military and Dr. Bruce McAfee, and also the head of the optical science department at the University of Arizona was very intrigued by my data. And he had said, if the lights come back, you should get better equipment, which I should, because I was using a cheap Canon Instamatic camera. But at any rate, my husband and I are out on the balcony, and I see a very faint amber orb appear behind his head in the distance. And I thought, whoa, could they be back? And I called Dr. Richard Powell, who's in the documentary, by the way, and he worked also on Star Wars and very well respected, and ended up to be the vice president of research at the University of Arizona a few years later. But I asked him what I should get, and he told me, and I ran out and got better camera equipment, top of the line Pentax camera, and a telelens and a star filter and all that. And he said, that I should communicate with him, which I did. But at any rate, it just so happened that the next night they came back, and I got terrific pictures of that as well on my new camera. And coincidentally, there was a meeting the next day at Village Labs, and I kept very scarce there because the media was there a lot. And I was staying anonymous, but I came up with, because I had my company for my vital health issues, health education learning programs, that they did ask me. I was honest. I said, I'm representing the couple that took the Phoenix Lights pictures from health education learning programs, and then they would go on to the next person, and that was that. But at any rate, we had this meeting, and I said, look, I don't know if they're really back, but I have a feeling, I just had a feeling they might come back a third night. I saw them the night before, and the night before that, I showed them the pictures. I said, you know what, let's have another little coincidence. The people that took video on March 13th, 1997, which happened to be north, south, east, and west, positioned in their homes, to be on the ready tonight. Well, let me tell you, it was like Close Encounters when the ship lands and you're da 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 da. It was miraculous. Straight lines, mirror images. I mean, 40 miles apart, a 20-minute array that was just unbelievable. And we're all capturing it from north, south, east, and west. The finale was this giant pyramid of 3 lights. And again, that's in the same location where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. And now I had video from 4 different north, south, east, and west that I could actually send to Dr. Bruce Maccabee. That's why I contacted him actually and sent my pictures from 95 as an afterthought. But interestingly, on March 13th, when anybody says that they were triangulated, it was impossible. In fact, I had hired a geology professor to come out to our homes to try to triangulate where this phenomena was. And he went to the Kristen house. And again, he shot the giant boomerang after 10 o'clock. And he comes to my house and I show him my footage of the 3 endpoints of a massive V or triangle object. And he said, when did you shoot that? I said, before 10 o'clock. He said, whoa, wait a minute. He said, let's call Steve Blonder and find out when that was done. He said, we're talking about not only different formations, an arrowhead and a triangle and a boomerang, which, by the way, that's what people described. These formations, there were, and you can see on the GAP page, the Spatial Animation Project page, that there were V formations, triangle formations, boomerang formations that people were seeing, thousands of people were seeing then as well. But at any rate, getting back to this, I said now we had these 4 videos that we could triangulate, and he said no, they cannot be triangulated on March 13th because they were taken at different times and they're different formations. So I was excited that Dr. Bruce Maccabee could try to triangulate them a couple years later. So this was in '98 and the finale of that. Now the other pictures, and one of my favorite pictures, which I believe is next, that as a story unfolded, and again, I was talking about, we'll get to 2017, but if you want me to hone in on this, this picture is one of my favorite pictures of all time because this happened 1 month after 9/11. Hadn't seen anything since '98. And I'm lying in bed and it was really scary. Our son was in law school at UCLA in LA. He didn't know what was going to happen next. They were just coming out with the anthrax. And I was really in panic mode, I have to tell you. Even though Dr. Gary Schwartz down at the University of Arizona Consciousness Study Department, who actually wrote the introduction to my book and had advised me to go out on my balcony and try to bring these things in. To me, that's a circus act. I'm very scientific when they do show up and try to be as meticulous as I can, but I did not go there. But here I was lying in bed, just looking out the picture window and thinking, where are you? Why haven't you shown yourself? Do you know what's happening down here? Can you help? What can we do? And suddenly disappeared. Okay. Now call it a coincidence, but I ran outside and I got a picture of it. And I also have another picture, which I do not have here, of this thing turning, which I just found recently. So these were objects. And if you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website photo page, you'll see a picture of 1960 disc shape that we had actually an anthropology museum at the Arizona State University that showed some of the best pictures, and Wendell Stevens had a collection, and he had a collection that included the 1960 picture of 3 discs, which are almost identical, daytime discs that are almost identical to this. So I welcome people to go to the photo page and take a peek at that. Do we have any more pictures available, or what's next? The same thing, and a year later, when our son, who's a neurologist, and he was the only one that read the 750-page journal, he has a heart of gold, and I really trusted his opinion, and it was just a mishmash of everything, looked at me after he read it, and he said, "Mom, you have to share this. The data is just too important not to share, and everything you've done has led up to this," because I've been involved in communication for 40 years, and out of the mouths of babes. And he happened to be home. He had a test the next day, and studying, and we were watching on the news. Actually, they came up with there was a crop circle that had formed in the UK, and they were showing the crop circle, and he was saying, "Oh, I wish I could see the Phoenix Lights. I wish I could see the Phoenix Lights." And as I'm looking outside, I'm thinking to myself, wow, wouldn't it be cool if you showed up, and not just 1 or 2, but if there's 3 of you, what could that be? No, go back. And with a beat, there they were. And I have to tell you, they were so excited. That my husband and Dan ran outside, and Dan was trying to do his differential diagnosis and couldn't figure it out. So that showed up then. Call it a coincidence. And again, it's in the same location as 2 months before the mass sighting and March 13th. Could there be a portal or gateway there? The following year, don't show it yet. The following year, please. Dan was home again. He was down at school, at medical school in Tucson. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay, will we be able to edit that out?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Do that. Okay. Should I start with this one again?
Yeah.
Do you want these? I mean, this isn't really the story, but
Yeah, I was just taking the photos in the order that you'd given them me on that page, this email you sent me. So if
okay.
this is not that important, let's go to the next one.
Well, I mean, that's important for the fact that it popped up. Okay. The following year, Dan was here for a test the next day, and our prize German Shepherd had to be put down that morning, and it was really a very emotional night for us. And he came up about 11 o'clock at night, and my husband was already asleep, and we went out on the balcony and we're hugging each other, and we were just really distraught, to be honest with you. And suddenly Dan says, "Mom, look at that." You can go to the next picture. And there were 3 points of light, like a giant V, and he whispers in my ear, "Mom, they're here to comfort you." And I always get filled up with that, because why did they show up? It was 11 o'clock at night. There they are. Again, call it a coincidence. I've also been I collect sunsets, and in 2 different sunsets, a month apart. And I did not see this while I was taking the sunset. But when I got 5 rolls of pictures from the holidays back from November and December, I was going through them and I thought, whoa, what is that? And you can show the next one if you would.
Oh, no.
And again, I collect sunsets, and this was not, I could not see this when it happened, but I'm looking, what is that? And as we enlarge it, and this has been analyzed and authenticated as well, I mean, there is a rod-shaped, giant rod-shaped object with kind of like some kind of protrusion out of out of the sides. 1 month later, I'm looking through the negatives and the pictures, and here the same exact phenomena, because you can see there's two little things out the sides there, shows up in the same place. And I did not see this when I was taking the pictures, but they're there. So, you know, I've come to the realization that whether these things are interstellar, interstellar, probably interdimensional, okay, just as I described earlier with the orbs that seem to cloak right in front of me. And I have to admit, not only did they seem to be there after we didn't see them anymore, but they seemed to be there for about 3 weeks after the close sighting. But here we have a November and December 2000 pictures that, whoa, I mean, there's something there that is massive. Now, whether it's a cigar or rod-shaped mothership, which is possible because there are people, and Native Americans have shared with me, as others, on Superstition Mountain and up in the Navajo Nation, there actually was a sighting the day before ours. They thought it would be big news of these orbs going around in circles and semicircles, and they all took their lawn chairs out. They're very open to these, but they've also seen these rod-shaped, massive rod cigar-shaped objects with orbs and actual craft coming out from them over the Navajo Nation and also the Superstition Mountain ranges. And again, if we go to the picture from 1 month after 9/11, I think that's coming up.
Yep.
And do you have the picture of the?
I don't know what's coming. No,
I don't know what that is.
those are the only.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I haven't got the right
Okay.
photos. So we'll have to. This one, the reason I put this one in, this is the object that I saw in 1975.
Oh, cool.
This is a time exposure. So it's pretty close. It has the same sort of coloring as the objects that you were getting. It's 1975 in Canada.
Wow, cool.
And
Very
that's
cool.
it's turning on an angle. It's an
Right.
object, sort of a plasma type object. So I just threw that in there.
Very cool. Well, now we can go back to 2017 if we can, because the story even gets better.
Yes, I don't have the 2016
No,
slides.
that's okay. No.
Can
this
I
is the
jump
story.
in and ask a question real
Sure.
quick too?
Sure.
A few moments ago, I think you were talking about the 3 days in a row of sightings, and you said you had a feeling that they were going to come back on the third day. And
Right.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that feeling, because many experiencers can often sense when they're going to have a sighting, or they talk about, you know, getting that feeling. So I didn't know if it was more than just intuition, or if there was maybe anxiety that comes along with that, or something that you could describe.
Well, I can get off on a whole nother tangent here because, as I mentioned, there has not been one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. I can't speak for other things, but I can for the Phoenix Lights. Quite the contrary. In fact, in our documentary, we get into the whole Hollywood and media threat, and harm, that it's so instilled in us that even Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the head of the Conscious Study Department at the University of Arizona, mentions in the documentary that if you're so inundated with this thought, how do you think you're going to feel when you see something massive in front of you? In fact, the movie Independence Day was real popular for the 6 months before the mass sighting. And children, and this is really interesting, children were usually the ones to see this massive V formation of lights coming towards them and jumping up and down, Independence Day, Independence Day. But as it got close, a calmness came over everyone, adults and children alike, a connectedness to the phenomena that once it passed, they felt they had to run after it. They asked their parents to get in the car and chase it. I mean, it's just amazing when you look at the data. And not only that, people have told me time and time again, I mean, they were changed by the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. They were enlightened, they were awakened. And what was even more poignant is there were a number of witnesses that had shared with me that they had had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. And I really, I was very struck by that because I did too. And I get into my near-death experience at 8 years old in detail in the book. We won't have time today. But could it have been a foundation for what has happened now? Because, and I just started admitting this, that not only did I come away from my near-death experience with knowledge far beyond my years, but I did meet 3 glowing giant beings with hoods above their heads during my near-death experience that I have felt have been with me since I was 8 years old, have been my guides. I don't hear voices, but I get feelings for things, strong feelings that I trust. I have come to trust, including the Phoenix Lights. I mean, when people read the book, they're going to see after the mass sighting, for the month after, there were some real heavy duty paranormal things that happened. And I didn't know why I had what I had. And when I asked my friends, I don't want to do this. This is not a topic I have any knowledge about, nor do I want to go there with the discrediting and all that. And they would say to me, Lynn, you've been doing this for 40 years. You know what to do with this data. And I still was so apprehensive. I went out on the balcony. I looked up at the sky, which I do when I communicate with these other phenomena, these other intelligences, when I meditate, and I actually have 10 ways to connect with these other intelligences in the book. But I literally went out on the balcony and just looked up at the sky and meditated and said, if I'm really supposed to do something productive and credible with this, just show me the way. I surrender. And I have to admit that I have surrendered to doing this. Whenever I get strong feelings to do something, I go with it. And it usually takes me to a good place. It always has since I was a child. And if you look at my bio, another little aside before we get into the connection, because I want to do that for a minute. But another little coincidence, call it. I don't know if people have seen it. And if you look at my bio, you'll see before I went to medical school, I was in professional musical theater on Broadway. I toured with Gordon McRae in Oklahoma and Betty Grable in Guys and Dolls, and understudied Barbara Eden. I drew Jeannie in Sound of Music and a whole host of other things. But I also played the mother, Florence, Arizona, in Raising Arizona with Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter and John Goodman and McDormand, Frances McDormand. What a cast! But what was really ironic is that once I came forward in 2004, someone had come up to me after the meeting and said, there's a reference to your character and UFOs in Raising Arizona. And I hadn't watched it since the late 80s because it came out in 87. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, go take a look. Well, if you look at the movie, and anybody that hasn't seen it yet, it's a Black comedy by the Coen brothers, 20th century mega hit, where the Arizona family have quintuplets, and Holly Hunter and Nicolas Cage can't conceive, so they kidnap one of the kids. After they do that, there's a press conference in front of our home. And one of the reporters sticks a microphone in my husband's face and says, there's a rumor that your son has been abducted by UFOs. Is there any truth to that? And my husband said, oh, please, son, please don't print that. If his mama reads that, she'll lose all hope. Now, first of all, that is the total opposite from my take, because again, there hasn't been one report of harm, threat, or abduction. It was quite a benevolent sighting and has touched people to the core, which we'll discuss in a sec. But there's no other reference to UFOs in the entire movie. And this was 10 years before the Arizona mass sighting in 97. What makes it even more poignant is that the cinematographer who went on to do Big, When Harry Met Sally, and How the West Was Won, and Addams Family, also created and directed the Men in Black series, which opened in 1997.
Nice.
The same year as the Phoenix Lights. So coincidence? Anyway, getting back to the near-death experience, because this is really cool data that is part of the Phoenix Lights, really important part of the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. Because people ask me all the time, what were they here for? And not only were they here to wake us up to their presence in a very gentle and non-threatening way, but they were always also here to wake each individual, one person at a time, to the positive potential that we have, to the spiritual beings that we are. In fact, what happened was that once people were telling me that they also had near-death experiences as children, I started researching that really intriguing aspect of the Phoenix Lights and found, again, a plethora of credible data at university level. The Omega Project is like 4 inches thick by Dr. Kenneth Ring at University of Connecticut, Dr. Bruce Grayson at University of Kansas, Dr. John Mack was actually writing a book about this before he met his untimely demise from Harvard. And what I found, and I lay it out very simply in the book, is that not only are the connections between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena, to have a mystical light along with the experience itself is very similar. It's amazing when you really lay it all out there. But the most profound and poignant aspect is the after effect, the positive awakening, the enlightenment, the connectedness that one feels to the universe, to the earth, to each other, that may have never felt that before. And I've had more Phoenix Lights witnesses tell me of this positive transformation. I actually started calling all unexplained phenomena UP and up, because it is an up. Not only is it an up in that you're awakened to the possibility that we're not alone in the universe, that there's so much more out there. And of course, we know now with the Hubble and the Kepler and the Spitzer telescopes that there are billions of other galaxies along with ours, each with their billions and trillions of stars, and that have their own planets around them. And when a star bursts, it sends organic materials. We know now that the ingredients of life, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, organic materials, carbon, are out there, that we're made of stardust, okay? And that panspermia spreads this stardust all throughout the universe. And our solar system, our one Milky Way solar system, is a very young solar system. It's only 14 billion years old. Our Milky Way galaxy, our solar system, is about 6 billion years old. So there are scientists now postulating that there could be intelligent, sentient entities out there billions of years ahead of us. Billions of years ahead of us. So when people ask about the Phoenix Lights mass sighting, again, there is so much more to this story than has been out there. And I welcome people to look at the website. It's packed with information to explore and to consider, not only the homepage, the photo page, the gap page, the news page, the share page. And I also, as a physician, urge people to contact me either through the website or through Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page, because just sharing with one person is healing. It's cathartic. It really, if you keep it inside, even if it can be explained, it's real to you, it festers, and that's not healthy. So it's really important that we give that aspect. And of course, the book and the documentary and the graphic novel activities coloring book. Now it's the holidays; it's the perfect time to purchase. They're all available on Amazon.com. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch the documentary for free. I've really tried to get as much out there for free that I can, so people can just explore and consider and learn and to grow.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. So I didn't have the 2007. Can you see your website on the screen?
Mhm.
Yes, if you go to, do you want to play? I was going to play, I don't know if you wanted to play first Governor Fife Symington coming forward, or do you want to do Kurt Russell?
Okay, I'll play those two for you. Hang on, I've got to go back to the presentation then.
Because I wanted to share the Kurt Russell thing.
Okay, so here we go. This is Simon first.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to show that after I talk about Symington.
I think you mentioned him.
Yeah, I mentioned him.
I'll play it, and then you can go with it.
Do you want me to mention it again? And then you can play it? Do you want me to do it again? Like lead in?
Yeah. Okay, hang on. I've just got to make sure I've got the. Oh, shoot. Damn it. Why is this resume slideshow? Resume. Oh, shoot. No, I can't even play the slideshow. Having lots of technical troubles today. See, here it is, but it's not going to play. Okay, here. Okay, explain it, and then I'll see if I can play it.
Okay. Okay. Right after the 10th anniversary of the now historic and still unexplained Arizona mass sighting, it was very interesting that our former, oh shoot, I'm sorry, can I start again?
Yeah.
Okay. Right before the 10th, okay, I'm sorry. Right after the 10th anniversary of the now historic and still unexplained Arizona mass sighting of March 13th, 1997, our former governor, Arizona Governor Fife Symington, bravely came forward to say that he actually he witnessed one of these mile-wide craft. And in his opinion, as an awarded military pilot, it definitely wasn't conventional. It wasn't flares, but it was otherworldly, which you would also hear from countries all over the world that are more open to these phenomena as being reality, that they were otherworldly. And here's one of his interviews that he did for CNN for your audience.
See, I've only got the part.
Fife Symington is now a businessman.
Shoot. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about this.
Fife Symington is now a businessman. He was the Republican governor of Arizona for 6 years, elected when the first George Bush was president. Now, a decade after leaving the State House, he takes me to a Phoenix park and discloses something unlike anything uttered by any other high-level U.S. politician.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
Governor Symington is referring to what is now known as the Phoenix Lights, an object videotaped by many and seen by thousands over several nights in the Arizona sky in 1997.
Major sighting here.
It was described by witnesses as larger than a football field and silent.
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
I just didn't know what to do. You know, it was just like, my God, how big is this thing?
The great state of Arizona, Fife Symington. The former governor, a Vietnam Air Force veteran, had never publicly acknowledged seeing it until now.
And I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
So why didn't he say anything then? Partly, he says, because he didn't want people to panic.
I think as a public figure, you have to be very careful about what you say, because people can have pretty emotional reactions. And I said my goal wasn't to try to stir the pot.
And he went to humorous and controversial lengths not to stir the pot. He held a news conference after the Phoenix Lights to announce the mystery had been solved.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
In the alien costume, the governor's chief of staff.
This just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
UFO enthusiasts were not amused, especially since the governor was believed to have seen nothing. But now he's coming out.
The lights were really brilliant, and it was just fascinating. I mean, it was enormous. It just felt otherworldly. You know, in your gut, you could just tell it was otherworldly.
Symington will be talking about this in an updated film about UFOs called Out of the Blue. He has also talked with an organization that wants UFO information more out in the open.
It's very significant that someone of the stature of a governor would come out and say that they acknowledge that they experienced a UFO, because it brings a lot of credibility and strength to the case.
Governor Symington says he did tell his family, friends, and staff about what he saw early on.
I still, behind the scenes, tried to investigate it, but I got nowhere.
So what were the Phoenix Lights? Well, frankly, we don't know. What we do know is that it's as much of a mystery today as it was a decade ago. Gary Tuckman, CNN, Phoenix.
Did you ever talk to Symington?
I tried. I actually tried. I got him the book and the documentary through his son, actually, but I've never heard a word. And I just wanted to thank him. He really tries to stay behind the scenes, but I would love to thank him for coming forward, because it was a big move forward, and it still is an incredible mystery. But I have to tell you, it's really important, not only when he says people were panicking, I'm sure it was the military and government that were panicking, because no one was panicking as far as any witnesses. If anything, they were elated and felt blessed and just in awe from what they had seen. But more than anything, it's important to acknowledge that it's not a belief in these things, it's a knowing. And you can just hear from his description, his knowing that what he saw was not from here, whatever it was, whether it was interstellar, interdimensional, time travelers, whatever. It's a knowing that something is out of our reality cube. And
Was there any other famous people that viewed it, and how many was the total witnesses? Because I've heard various figures. What was the estimate of the number of witnesses?
I have to say,
in the night of the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah, I have to say that every year since I came forward, since actually the premiere of our internationally award-winning documentary in 2005 at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theater, it's been sold out every year, and it's one of the only just regular people are there. Just there's a number of UFO aficionados that come each year, but a small number, because most of the audience is just mainstream, which is amazing. Whether they're curious or they saw it, and every year I ask. And I have to tell you, just for my own data alone, there were between 10 and 20,000 people that saw the mass sighting. Every year there's more and more people that contact me now. Even pilots and military are contacting me that are retiring and telling their side of the story. So the story continues to evolve. And one of those stories that evolved in 2017, we know that there was a New York Times article about the Pentagon study funded by the $22 million funded study of military and pilots that was connected with Harry Reid, and the Nimitz pilots have now come forward, which again, it blows me away, because their description of what they saw is very similar to what my husband and I saw right outside our bedroom window. But be that as it may, shortly after that, which is really interesting, because I mentioned that the morning after the mass sighting, I had called the air traffic controllers to confirm that what we saw and what I photographed was the same exact phenomena in the same exact location as 2 months before, as we know now, 2 years before. But at any rate, they confirmed that it was the same exact phenomena over Class B restricted airspace, and that a couple of pilots had called in. One commercial pilot who was actually departing said, "What the hell are these lights over me?" And a private pilot called in, it was about a half mile out, to report this V-shaped formation of 6 lights, which is exactly what I was seeing and photographing at the same time during the mass sighting. And I actually mentioned the pilots in the first edition of the book in 2004. I didn't know who they were, but I mentioned that because I thought it was very credible that they too were confirming that these phenomena were over Class B restricted airspace. And lo and behold, at 2017, the private pilot came forward, and it was actor Kurt Russell. And his admission is really poignant and really exciting. And his UK interview, we can show you.
Let me see if I can play it. I'm having lots of trouble here, but let me see if I can play it.
It's more, yeah, who knows? Because this is an international story. Because of you both being here, I looked into the international files, not covered by our Ministry of Defense, but maybe covered by yours. This took place in Arizona. An unidentified pilot, according to the press cuttings, flying near an airport in Arizona with his son when he spotted 6 lights in the night sky. So he called from the airplane to air traffic control to say, I'm seeing these lights here. I wasn't expecting any other planes. They're none supposed to be on my landing path. Can you tell me what's going on? They said there are no other planes. He said, I'm seeing 6 bright lights coming towards me. Mystery unresolved.
Except
tail
number for that plane was Bonanza 2 Tango Sierra, and I was the pilot.
No
way. Oliver and I.
Doesn't say that in the briefing.
Oliver and I.
I should have read to the end.
Oliver and I were flying, and I was flying him to go see his girlfriend, and we were on approach, and I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape, and Oliver said to me, I was just looking at him. I was coming in. We're maybe a half a mile out. Oliver said, "Pa, what are those lights?" And I then it kind of like came out of my reverie, and I said, "I don't know what they are." I said, he said, "Are we okay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna call him," and I reported it. And they said, "We're not painting anything. We don't show anything." I said, "Well, okay. I'm going to declare it's unidentified. It's flying, and it's 6 objects." We landed. I taxied, dropped him off, took off, went back to LA. Never said a word. He never said a word. I never thought of it. 2 years later, Goldie is watching a television show when I came home. Yeah. And the show is on UFOs. But as I came home, "Hey, honey, how's it going?" And I'm kind of hearing the TV going, and I stopped and I started watching, and it was on that event. Now, that was the most viewed UFO event. Over 20,000 people saw that. And I'm watching this, and I'm feeling like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's like, why do I know this? You know what? And it's not clear to me. And finally, I said. Then they said the pilot reported it. A general aviation pilot reported it on landing. I'd never thought of it since then, and I said, "That was me. That was me." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'll go to my logbooks." So I went to my logbooks, and there was the flight at that time, and I didn't mention anything about the UFO. The fascinating part of that to me is that it just went literally out of my head. Yeah. And Oliver never mentioned it. And had I not seen that show, I'd have never thought of it again. That to me was the weird part.
Believe it out, Chris?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm convinced. It's unidentified. It's just unidentified. It's flying, and it's an object. It's an object. Yeah. Moving towards you at this.
We need to move on.
That actually, there's another poignant point that he made, that he was not alone in that. There were a number of people who saw the mass sighting and didn't say anything to anybody and didn't even remember it till months, even years later. We have a psychiatrist that was coming up from Tucson, 2 hours south of Phoenix, to Phoenix for a swim meet with his daughter, his wife, and a friend. And he was sitting in the passenger seat. And his story is amazing. I actually share his letter to the Village Labs in the book, because they saw this massive craft coming towards them on the highway. The arms of this craft extended way on the sides, on each side. And he looked out the window up at this craft. I mean, he saw this thing coming slowly over them, directly above them. Nobody said a word to each other. Months later, 6 months or so later, they saw something on TV about it. And he said, "Whoa, we saw that." And they all confirmed. I mean, it's just amazing, the different aspects, and there's more. I mean, we just discussed the tip of the iceberg. I do hope people will delve into the book, the latest edition of the book. I recommend the ebook because it has colored pictures and live links, so you can continue to explore. But there is so much more to this story. And one of the main reasons I had to come forward after 7 years of anonymity, and I'm so glad that I did, because I've met wonderful people like yourself, Grant, and Nicole, of course, course, who's helping us out here, and just opened up a whole new world to me, and it's opened up a whole new world to others out there, that we are not alone. We are not alone each other, and we are not alone in the universe.
Maybe we can just end with this. I'm sorry, we should maybe do a little segment again and maybe put it in when I put it on my YouTube channel with the actual Phoenix Light sightings or this photos that you sent me. Can we end with this spatial, geospatial animation? I've got that I can play. Maybe just explain what that's about before I play it.
Okay, do you know which one it is?
It's,
I think it's the one Symington saw. It's down more.
Yeah. This here?
No, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, we could do that one, and the other one is what that one's great, and the other one is what Simon said. But we can show that one first. Can I give a lead in?
Yeah.
Okay. What was wonderful is that the investigators were so dedicated and so meticulous in their analysis of the data from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, Village Labs, which was a huge computer lab who was also studying UFOs on the side in Tempe near Arizona State University, and Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who got about 1,000 at least reports. 2 or more people had to see the same craft to be in the study. And miraculously, what came out of the study is there were 10 different craft. Now, there were multiple things happening at multiple places over multiple times for over a dozen hours. But when you look at these craft, they're very different. Now, whether it was one craft that could morph, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade, which ultimately is what the investigators concluded after 12 years of studying these data meticulously, because there was multiple things happening. And we have an animation on the GAP page, Geospatial Animation Project, on the Phoenix Lights Network website that can illustrate a little bit about these phenomena.
Okay.
This overview shows the ground paths of various unknown objects that traverse the skies over central Arizona and various locations throughout Phoenix between 8 and 9 o'clock p.m. on March 13, 1997. The object seen by the greatest number of witnesses over the longest period of time was described as a large V-shaped craft similar in shape to a carpenter square, with wings swept back at a 60-degree angle and squared-off ends. There were 5 large lights equally spaced underneath the object, and a dome-shaped canopy on top. Tim Lee, a witness living near the Squaw Peak area, created this color illustration that was later featured on the cover of USA Today. Many witnesses described a similar object over 7th Avenue and Indian School Road, then watched it vanish as several fighter jets from Luke Air Force Base approached. After the jets passed, the object reappeared again, then proceeded towards South Mountain. This second craft did not have a dome on top and was observed at a higher altitude. Other witnesses reported seeing a boomerang or V-shaped object with a 120-degree sweep and pointed tips flying over Lake Pleasant and the west side of Phoenix at a high altitude. Airline pilots reported that the object was well above their 18,000-foot altitude. Underneath the object were 6 sets of lights and 3 lights in each set. Another mile-wide V-shaped object with a 90-degree sweep was seen descending towards the approach end of Sky Harbor Airport at an altitude of approximately 1,500 feet. A witness who observed the object less than 300 feet away reported that as it floated by in front of the moon, it appeared to be semi-transparent. There were 4 reddish-amber lights along the leading edges and a red orb trailing behind the object. A 5th object was described by witnesses as a mile-wide black triangle. Some witnesses reported seeing lights in the windows, and others did not. This massive black triangle was first observed near Scottsdale and Pima Road, traveling west. Then the object turned south along Interstate 51 and flew over Squaw Peak. It is believed that this particular object was the one former Arizona Governor Five Symington reported seeing as it traveled south toward Sky Harbor Airport. Another equilateral triangle, estimated to be around 2,500 feet long, had 3 white lights, one on each of the tips and one red light in the center. Witnesses first observed this triangular craft just north of the Beeline Highway, traveling southeast across Mesa, and was last seen near the intersection of Riggs Road and Power Road in Chandler. The craft then appeared to split into 2 identical copies that traveled away from each other in 2 different directions. Witnesses along Interstate 10 also reported seeing a mile-long black triangle traveling north from Casa Grande to Phoenix. The craft had 3 lights on the nose and 1 on each tip. It is not clear whether or not this particular craft is the same object that flew over Squaw Peak. There were also reports of an enormous white luminescent oval craft, estimated to be a mile long by 3/4 of a mile wide, with amber lights around its perimeter. The object was last seen hovering just above the ridge of the McDowell Mountain Range, northeast of Phoenix.
There was a lot going on, and that was just for an hour or 2. And we're talking much more happening from 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon, 3 p.m. in the afternoon until 5:30 the next morning. So there is much more to this story, and I'm so honored and grateful that you're sharing it.
I'm sorry I'm having all the technical problems. Let's do this last one and then we'll shut it down. And I may do another interview later on to get it proper, because you've got a lot of material to do and it's very important. Let's do this. Let's do this last one, and then we'll you can tell us how people can contact you, and we'll leave it at that.
I have a question for you. Did you learn something new today?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't realize there was that many crafts.
That's the thing. That's why I had to come forward.
Yeah,
there is so much to this story that needs to be told and needs to be heard. And Larry Lowe did a beautiful job with these animations and illustrations. Steve Lance, who did the narration, actually is my collaborator on the documentary. And of course, we have Bill Hamilton and Michael Tanner, who did an incredible job compiling the data. And one of the data is actually this animation of what the former Arizona Governor Five Symington saw during the Arizona mass sighting of March 13th, 1997.
Wonderful. This is a forensic recreation of the Sky Harbor Triangle that was first reported near Carefree around 8:15 and was last reported near Sky Harbor at 8:40 p.m. The path of the craft has been pieced together by combining reports of similar objects. We begin with a view from the intersection of Lone Pine and Scottsdale Roads, 2 miles away from the craft as it hovers 1,000 meters over Lone Pine and Pima. The craft, depicted as 2 miles wingtip to wingtip, proceeds east down Lone Pine Road. The view moves to the intersection of Jomax and Tatum Roads, 3 miles south of the next sighting at 8:26 p.m. at the intersection of Lone Pine and Cave Creek Road. At this point, the object began a heading change and turned to the south. At 8:28 p.m., a report from a material site on the East Cave Creek Road put the craft halfway through the turn. This view is to the west from a point above Jomax and Tatum, roughly 3 miles from the center of the craft. At 8:30 p.m., Max and Shala Saracen reported the craft near Crave Creek and Pinnacle Peak Roads. This report included UFO occupants seen in the windows of a triangle, which they described as at least 2 miles wide. At 8:35 p.m., the craft was observed from the intersection of North 32nd Street and East Shea Boulevard, proceeding south towards Squaw Peak, where it was last seen entering the Phoenix Metropolitan Valley. At 8:37 p.m., the craft was observed by Terry Mansfield and members of her hospice group on the south side of Squaw Peak. The next vantage point is the first publicly shown recreation of what then Governor Five Symington would have seen as the object flew over Squaw Peak. At 8:40 p.m., the craft was reported from 36th Street in East Washington, where it hovered short of the northern edge of the airport perimeter.
The final view is a recreation of what the tower crew would have seen had they been looking due north. Some reports have this craft departing directly vertically, a truly astounding conclusion to a truly astounding series of observations.
One last question before you sort of give people your contact details. In the end, what do you think all these crafts and all this was all about? What was their main objective in doing all the flybys that they did?
As I've said since the beginning, I don't know what they were. I just know that they were. And it's time we get this topic out in the open and address it, accept it, and study it so we can find out who is driving these things. But it just, the data speaks for itself. What these phenomena did, and again, it was a parade. It was a parade to wake people up, not only to their presence in a very gentle, non-threatening way, whoever was driving these. Yeah. But also to wake us up to the positive potential we have as human beings, to what we're doing to our planet. I can't tell you, people, and we go into this in detail, I mentioned some today and in detail in the book, how it affected people at a deep, deep soul level. They will never be the same because of the Phoenix Lights. It's not a belief, it's a knowing.
Beautiful. Sometimes I lecture, I have a theory called the theory of wow, where I basically say that they just want you to go wow, because I say, and I bring up the Phoenix Lights, I say, why does whoever it is need a craft that's that big? I mean, this is for a display for people just to realize we're not alone, something's going on, and raise consciousness. That would be accurate.
And also to allay fears. Yeah. That was another main reason that I came forward after 7 years of anonymity, not only to set the record straight and to do everything as a scientist and as a physician and as an experiencer myself and as an educator, but to allay those fears. Again, I can't speak for other things, but I can for the Phoenix Lights. And these phenomena, when you look at the history, and that's a whole nother story of these phenomena being here since human documentation began. They're even mentioned in Sumerian writings, India writings, the Bible, Ezekiel's wheel, and so forth, pictures in the 15th and 16th centuries. The Foo Fighters of World War II were the same exact phenomena. Dr. Richard Haynes confirmed that for me, that my phenomena that I photographed up close and personal are the same phenomena that each side, Germany and Japan and United States, thought everybody had to spy, somebody had to spy technology. And it wasn't until after the war that we found out that nobody did. These phenomena have been around for a long, long time. And certainly the Native American indigenous cultures belief that there are other intelligences and have been seeing these and documenting them, petroglyphs on our mountains right here in Arizona for centuries. They've been here and they are here, and they're just trying to wake us up that we are not alone.
Any final questions, Nicole?
No, I think we've covered it all. And yeah, I would tend to agree with Grant's theory of wow and what you're saying, that it is a wake-up call or an awakening. I think the other night on SOR, I referred to it as a woo slap. You know, it's like slaps you into this awakening where you have to figure out what it is on a personal level, not anything else, but it does. It's a calling. So thank you very much for sharing with us today.
Oh, absolutely. You bring up such a great point. Such a great point, Nicole, because I myself felt compelled. People, when they have a paranormal experience like this, especially with the Phoenix Lights, want to find out what it was, who's driving it. And we're still looking, and the story is still evolving, and it's important. It's bringing in more and more people. The worldwide now, people are looking at similar phenomena and say, "Whoa, there's the Phoenix Lights," and that's pretty cool. And the more people now, again, the data is there. I just urge people, and I welcome people to go to the website, the Phoenix Lights Network website, which is packed with information to explore and consider, especially the home and the photo and the gap and the news page is loaded with wonderful Travel Channel, History Channel, etc., as well as the share page. If anybody wants to share, contact me. I take confidentiality very, very seriously, but if you'd like to share, you can read people that have shared their sightings as well. And then we have the book, the 4th edition of the Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. The first book I felt was so important, even though the publishers wanted me to write another book. No, No, it's important that people understand what really happened here and how the story evolved. Some of it we shared today, and the connection between all unexplained phenomena. So we've added chapters to the book, and I recommend the ebook because it has colored pictures and live links. It's only $9, but it really has evolved. And the 4th edition has even a picture, and we didn't get a chance to get into it. Not only did I have a near-death experience as a child, which a number of Phoenix Lights witnesses did and was reawakened by the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. But I also have a picture that I share for the first time in this edition, the 4th edition, in the hard book and in the ebook, that confirms that we do go on, that the essence of who we are does go on. We will see our loved ones again. There is much more to this story. And then, of course, we have the documentary, which has won a dozen International Film Festival awards. We're so honored to be able to share an overview, a gentle overview of not only the Phoenix Lights, but how it affected people, the history of it, as well as the fear factor that we're so used to from the media and Hollywood. But also, we have in the DVD bonus features. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Edgar Mitchell shares the cover-up. He goes into that, which we don't go into in the documentary, as well as a pilot that confirms that it was definitely not flares, the only explanation that was ever forthcoming, which has never been proved, as well as so much more. There's so much to the story, and I welcome people to please take a look at that and our trilogy, our graphic novel activities coloring book for all ages, that is 150, 160 pages, packed with not only Phoenix Lights data, but 80 crop circles to color and activities and word finders and so forth that teachers are now using in the classroom, as well as parents with their kids and grandparents with their grandkids. So thank you for letting me share. Keep looking up.
Beautiful. Dr. Lynne Kitei, thank you for coming forward, and thank you for sharing with me today. And hopefully we can exchange some photographs, and we'll do this again.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, the tape is off. We're going to go to our next interview.